So I don't even need to do that. Alright. Hello everyone, I'm Alan, also known as McLaren2009, and today I am playing Train Sim World 3. Let's go. Timetable. Let's do one of these. Alright, let's do a simple intermodal job. Alright, so currently I'm going to do a relatively basic job on the Horseshoe Curve DLC, which is a legacy carryover from Train Sim World 2. I try to do this route a lot, because oddly enough this is the place that I'm actually going to work one day, hopefully. So, let's get all of this set up. Go air brakes, this lead locomotive, so cut in, lead. The cutting in allows me to control the train brake from here. And lead allows me to control the independent brake from here. So save the changes, turn on the generator field. Alright, but unfortunately this is not enough to have the entire train set up. So let's turn on distributed power, turn on the window heater because why not? Number lights, this is short hood lead. Let's see, how many locomotives do we have? Well, not looking forward to that. I already turned on distributed power. Let's turn on banking comms. Exit. Alright, now let's go set up the elements. This needs to be Long Hood Trail. And number lights on. Let's turn lights back off. brake. And we're rolling. What does this weigh? 6,000 tons, and we've got 4 locomotives. It's probably going to come back to bite me that I didn't go back and set up the 2 rear locomotives. But one can only hope that the game will do something right eventually. 240 yards until it goes down to 15. So I'm putting out about 45,000 pounds of traffic to effort. And this is going to be a long trip. We are going basically the entire length of the way up this DLC. We're going up here to the Altoona. Or the, yeah, we're going up there. Oh boy. And nothing like already going over the speed limit. Why do I have a red signal? Alright, I don't know what's going on with that. Idea why it slowed down, or why it's still speeding up even though we're only on Notch 3. So keep an eye on the accelerometer to see if we're speeding up or slowing down. Currently we're still speeding up. Maybe. Actually, I think we're slowing down slightly, which kind of makes sense considering we're going uphill. So, gonna bump it up to Notch 3. Slightly speeding up a little bit. That way it's not blocking the gauge. And slow down. Speed a little bit fast. The speed limit does go up, but the problem is your entire train has to be in the new speed zone, which it currently isn't. And I've got like 70 cars, because that's also including 4 locomotives. So let's speed up a little bit. Basically, I really like this game, even though it's probably not the most exciting thing in the world. But at the same time, it also leaves a little bit to be desired. Like, it's kind of inconvenient that, at least for this DLC, you have to go back and correct all of the other locomotives. I kind of took it the easy way out and only fixed 2 of them instead of going back and fixing the last 2. But it's whatever. Luckily, I was able to get it moving. So luckily, these 2 ES44 AC locomotives are pretty strong. Okay. Now we can speed up a lot because we're in the 35-mile-an-hour zone. But since it is a train and it is rather heavy, it's going to be pretty hard to get up to that speed, especially going uphill. And then you look at the map here, we're pretty much going to be going uphill all the way until about here, approximately. Alright, let's go up to... Notch 5 should be good for now. I am not yet I'm not yet a train conductor, but I've played this game enough to know that you want to speed up and slow down gradually. You don't want to overload the traction motors, so you don't want to speed up or you don't want to try to speed up too quickly. And also for the same reason, when dynamic braking, you don't want to slow down too quickly. Oh, actually, that's off, and I should be able to... And I can. Okay, so I can actually make a thumbnail for this stream. I haven't done that for my other ones. I do kind of wish I could use the chroma key with the Streamlab program, but maybe I just don't know how to do it yet. Alright. Yeah, and see, even though it took a little while to get there, Notch 5 is getting us up to speed just fine. Slow and steady is the way to do anything with a train. South Fork, 3 miles. And then once we get to South Fork, more than likely we're going to stay on, I could probably be this track. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, probably this track. So it'll stay 45, or might go up to 45, I don't remember. I'm trying to learn more about this specific route because it's the exact area that I'm trying to work in real life. So I heard online that you're supposed to, after you get trained to do the job, you have to get qualified on a specific route. So even though the simulation's not perfect, I thought it would be a good idea to get a feel for what the terrain looks like. I've been through that area in a truck, but I didn't work anywhere around the railroad. Stay generally under the max permitted speed limit. It kind of messes with the AI a little bit, and they'll kind of, if they get a green signal, they'll just come right up behind you and kind of like tailgate on you until they get a red stick or a red signal. And that's kind of annoying, but the game kind of treats that red mark as a hard limit that you don't go over. And since I actually have to manually control the speed of the train, I would prefer to stay under it, whereas the AI seems to just do the speed limit and hope for the best. But we are making progress. That's a problem. Yeah, we're going north towards Altoona. Alright, let's ease off the throttle a little bit. start getting down to like 1 mile, that change in speed approaches quick. Less than a mile to the first waypoint. It's not even a turn. We're staying on this line going north. Because if you go up through this way, past the branch for the South Fork, it goes down to like 10 miles an hour. But with these ones, it doesn't normally send you that way. The only time you can really control the switches is in the yards, where you have to manually align the tracks yourself. But out on the main line out here, it's all done remotely from the dispatcher. See, proceed as signals indicate. So 300 yards in closing. Until we get down to the 30-mile-an-hour zone. Let's go down to 3. See if that'll keep us slowing down a little bit. Yeah, see, on this specific track, it'll go from 35 to 45 once we get past this area. Like around here, it should get up to about 45. But the catch is that those back 2 locomotives have to clear that area before the speed limit goes up. Like right now our train is 1.1 miles long. See, it's going to start going back up here pretty soon. Where it starts to get difficult is when you get to the other side of the mountain, or you get to the other side of the horseshoe curve, and you start going downhill pretty much all the way to Altoona. It's not a steep grade, but you're going downhill regardless. Initially, I thought I liked the GP38 better, but I started getting a little bit more practice playing with this one, and when I realized this one is stronger and more capable, I realized that, no, actually I think I like this one more. The 38 is much easier to use, but this one can do more. And to be completely honest, this one might actually look a little bit better too. But as it turns out, this is intended as like the road locomotive. this is the one that you use to pull long trains over great distances. Whereas the GP38 is kind of like a intermediate locomotive that you generally use for switching cars, but it can be used to move things over the road. It's just it would be preferable to use this one, or at least that's how I'm understanding it so far. I guess I'll have to wait and see for when I actually get to the railroad, which one I see more often. I mean, honestly, for all I know, they might not have either of them anymore, and it might be something completely different. And since I never worked directly for the railroad, I did build cars for them, so I've seen their locomotives from a distance, but I never actually got to see them up close. There's the back of the train. It's going to be a minute before we get up to 50. Well, only a minute. Going downhill's a little bit more interesting because you have to find a way to balance braking. When I originally got this game, well, actually before I got this one, I started with Train Sim World 2, and the tutorials for it are not the best. Like, not by a long shot. And, they never mention how to even use the dynamic brake. It's just kind of like there. But you'll see in a couple of the locomotives, there'll be signs like this right here that say, before engaging the dynamic brake, make sure that the throttle is set to idle for 10 seconds. Alright, so fine. You get to the point where you want to start slowing down, you switch the throttle back to idle, count 10 seconds, and then start setting up the dynamic brake. But those are literally the only instructions you have on it. So what I would do is I would start using the dynamic brake and then apply the automatic brake if the speed starts getting up there a little too high, and then I'll try to just apply enough of the automatic brake that it will start reducing the speed once it finally propagates through the entire train, and then basically release the automatic brake as soon as as soon as the speed starts going down. But the problem is, I didn't know that there was a limit, or there was a range where the dynamic brake works the best. And so I was using it at whatever speed the train was currently going. Like, the biggest place that I would use it would be on the Peninsula Corridor, the Caltrain passenger route, and I would set up the dynamic brake about a mile and a half away from the stop, and I'd be going like 60, 65 miles an hour, and then I would use the dynamic brake to bring down the speed gradually, and then once I get closer to the station, I'll start the initial reduction of the automatic brake. Well, fast forward a couple of weeks, and I get Train Sim World 3, and there's a tutorial for the BNSF route on Cajon Pass, where they tell you how to use the dynamic brake. And it turns out that the dynamic brake has an effective range between 10 and 30 miles an hour. And anything above 30, it's not a very efficient use of the dynamic brake. You're not getting much braking power at that speed. And then when I was having trouble trying to get these locomotives to even move, I switched to, or I read through the actual GE manual for this exact locomotive, and even that one said that ideally you would only use the dynamic brake up to about 23 to 25 miles an hour. So basically I've been incorrectly using the dynamic brake this whole time because the game never taught you how to use it. It just gives you the train and says good luck. And then doing one of the coal scenarios on this route, I found out that if you use the dynamic brake above Mach 4 in the rain, apparently it can cause a derailment. That would have been a pretty handy thing to know before that happened, like 3 times in a row. So, yeah, without actually being actively trained by the railroad, I don't have the slightest idea. If that's a thing, can that derail the train? I mean, it would kind of make sense. Like, for instance, my experience is with trucks. So, as a truck driver, when going down a hill, your first choice is to use the engine retarder, or the Jake brake. And then you have to learn early on, don't use that in the rain, because if you use it incorrectly or you use too much of it, it can cause a slide, it can cause you to skid. And that's been a problem with a combination tractor-trailer that weighs 40 tons. So it would only make sense if the dynamic brake, which is using the traction motors to kind of work against themselves, it would only make sense that using that under wet conditions would cause something bad to happen. But that's just what I would consider to be a reasonable assumption, and not anything that I was ever taught or had it ever explained. Alright, so we're going uphill, and it gets a little bit steeper. I'm going to try to keep it around 45, hope for the best. But you have to take that with a grain of salt, because once again, you look at the map, we're going to pass here, and then the speed limit is going to start going down. And then right when you get to the horseshoe curve itself, it has a speed limit of 30 past the visitor center. I mean, to be fair, that is a pretty tight turn. So, yeah, we're going to start slowing down, just not yet. Got a long way to go before we slow down. And as you can see out there, I have not even come close to any of the, or completing any of the route tasks, like the little fetch quests and things that you have to find just laying around on one of the stacks of ties back there. There was one of the yellow hard hats that you're supposed to find. I've got like a quarter of them, I think. Since this is 1% up, which from driving a truck, I don't even start to worry unless it's above like 7%. But it turns out with a train, any grade is a bad thing. Like 2% can get a little bit crazy, and then 3% you're really keeping an eye on your speed. So there's a lot of stuff that's comparable between trains and trucks, but it's like totally different worlds. So it's like a completely different thing to get into and learn about. Alright, that yellow signal, the best I can figure, is that means there's either an oncoming train coming from the opposite direction, or there's something ahead of me on this track. I don't really know. That's another one of my grievances with the game, that I don't understand any of the mechanics without actually being a licensed train engineer. And then, if I was a licensed train engineer, I would look at like this and realize that maybe this isn't the game for me. There's a lot of stuff that's missing. Like when I was setting up the switches earlier, the game tells you to use this banking comms button to remotely control those two rear locomotives. but in actuality, it would be controlled from here, but it would be using that distributed power circuit back there. And then these smart displays have like half the things they're supposed to, or not even half the things they're supposed to have. And then like a lot of other stuff in the cab isn't interactable when it probably could be. The game looks good and it simulates a lot of stuff. But when you start looking around, you start to realize how much stuff is missing. Of course, to someone untrained like me, at a first glance, you wouldn't really know those things were missing unless you looked into it or had it explained to you. Like, I know that this is a thing, and I know how to turn that on, but it's just such a hassle to use it. Because, once again, as not trained on these systems in real life, I know that this is a button that you periodically hit to basically tell the computer that you're still awake and still alert, so you're still paying attention. And in my understanding, that would be something that would give you like a prompt every couple of minutes, like say 10-15 minute intervals. But no, if you turn on the warning devices back there, it's literally going to go off like every 20-30 seconds. And even if you're actively working with other controls, I don't think it worries if you change the throttle, but if you're messing with the brakes, the dynamic brakes, any of that, like you're going down a hill, it will still give you the prompt telling you to hit the alerter, which turns out it's mapped on the keyboard to just hit the Q button. But if you don't acknowledge it, it will basically trigger an emergency event and it'll completely stop the train. And it gets frustrating about the third time that that happens, because it's like, I was going down a hill! I was working on the brakes! And then it just decided, okay, we're stopping now. Like, I was at the controls. I was actively using the controls. I was clearly still alert and working with the locomotive. But no, I missed the prompt and it decided we're stopping now. So while I want to turn it on for kind of like the realism sake of it, at the same time, it's just like, is the system really supposed to go off every 30 seconds? That seems a little absurd. But who knows? Maybe the real system actually does go off every 30 seconds. Let's slow down to notch 6. I guess realistically I could turn off the display and just run using this as my speedometer, but honestly, I prefer the information on the screen. For the most part, it's pretty good information. It tells you what the current speed limits are. It's just got everything covered. Alright, still a yellow signal. Mile to a lower speed zone, and then it's going to lower down even further than that, maybe 3 miles past it. So when I play this game, I don't yet have the real-world experience with how these things work. Whereas when I play, like, the truck simulators, I can tell you, like, the stories of what I've seen, places I've been, things I've actually done. But I don't have that with this. The best I can do is when you do like the coal runs. I can tell you about the gondola cars because I've worked on thousands of them. Alright, so like those 3 posts back there, or there are 3 lights back there, I was trying to figure out what on earth they could possibly be referring to. And I thought I had an idea. I'm surprised I didn't derail there. Because it seems like it goes from the top to the bottom one being the farthest right, the middle one being in the middle, and the top one being the farthest left. Or maybe I have it the other way around. It's hard to say. But I try to keep an eye on, like, where I am when the light is on and what's going on the tracks around me. To try to get a read on what the lights mean. Because when you go into the menu, it doesn't tell you. Like, you go over here, you go to the heads-up display guide. Nothing. Like, I've never seen that on any of the American lines, so I don't know what that does. I'm not sure I've used a locomotive that has a cruise control. So, no idea there. Seen this a lot. These are in all the locomotives. These are in all of them. And there's a speedometer, reverser. These things, you find out that this little yellow dot right here is the prompt to hit the alerter button. I don't know what these are. I know what this is. and I kind of know what these are. But that's it. That's all the information that I have for the heads-up display. Everything else you kind of have to just figure it out on your own and hope for the best. Like right now I'm going more than twice the legal speed limit because the game tells you that it tells you the speed limit for the track you're currently on, when it would probably be a good idea to tell you the speed limit for the track you're going to be on. Like, I know from doing this a little bit that those two tracks are generally reserved for going southbound from Altoona down to Johnstown. And then these ones are all the northbound tracks. And then it seems to make sense that there would be a distinction between, like, which ones are stopping and which ones are going through. But that's all controlled remotely by the game anyway, so I don't know. Maybe it would make more sense if I tried using the scenario editor, but it hurt my head enough just trying to use the livery editor. I'm not sure I could effectively write a good scenario without randomly needing to be a qualified yardmaster to do it. Getting there, though. Let's slow down. Even though it's 1.1% up, we're getting a little too close to 30. I say that even though I've been doing twice the legal speed limit for like 10 minutes now. Honestly, since the speed limit passing by that switch was 15, the fact that I was doing more than 30 probably should have caused a derailment, honestly. Because I can't imagine going fast around that, like, little S-bend through the switch. I can't imagine that's a good thing to do fast. So let me double check. Oh, yeah, the downhill part is starting now. So, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000. Okay, in theory, anytime past this point, I should be able to activate the dynamic brake. So we gotta wait for the rest of the train to get over the hill. But we're going to start speeding up here pretty soon. On one hand, I kind of wish I knew when you're supposed to hit the horn, when you're supposed to use the bell, but I don't know. It's not information you need to play the game, so figure it out on your own, I guess. Alright, let's set that up. Matter of fact, I can put that on. Let's go with 2. Okay, good. We're slowing down. Alright, get it under 25. And kill the automatic. Let that recharge. Apply it again when we need it again. As you can see by keeping an eye on the accelerometer down there, it wants to start speeding up. So what I'm thinking is I probably have the dynamic brake in a good position, because if it holds this speed, we're pretty well set. And then we'll only need to hit the automatic brake again if it starts getting up closer to 30 again. And since we're about 2 miles away from the Horseshoe Curve, going 21's not bad. We're slowly speeding up, although we're also going to start slowing down because the grade is kind of a little more shallow now. And then it's something relatively small, it's like 0.3% when you actually get up to the yard. But the part that sucks is once you get up closer to the yard, it's going to have you, you're going to slow down to like 25, and then 15 for like the last 2 miles. Something like that. For as many little trivial things I like to complain about with this game, I do still really like it. And I've only had it for maybe a month now, and I'm currently only up to a little over 40 hours in it. And then I had about 25 in Train Sim 2, Train Sim World 2. So I'll definitely keep playing it. I'll keep putting time into it and figuring it out. I do like the game. But that might also be partly because it's something I'm trying to do outside of video games. And we're still at 25. And it's worth noting that if you look at the gauge for the tractive effort, it was at 70,000 pounds, but now that we're up to 25, it's down to 62. So it's pretty safe to assume that this is not the limit of the dynamic brake, but this is the end of when it's the most effective. So if we speed up too much past this, we'll have even less effort, if I'm understanding how this works properly. Which, to be completely honest, I'm probably not understanding it properly. Probably not remembering what I read correctly, something along those lines. But making pretty solid progress. Oh, and then as you can see, the speed has gone down, but the tractive effort has gone up. Or the braking force has gone up. So this is probably the upper limit of when our braking force is the strongest. And then it wasn't until much later that I figured out that the opposite of this would also have to be true, in the sense that if you need to have the throttle on idle for 10 seconds before you can activate the dynamic brake, it would only make sense that you have to have the dynamic brake on off for 10 seconds before you should activate the throttle, so you don't damage the traction motors. But even keeping that in mind, I don't think the game simulates, like, system failures. Like, I remember back when I was playing the flight simulator, if you had some experience in the game, you could turn on a sort of version of in-flight emergencies. Like, your engines could go out, you could have a fuel leak, hydraulic failures, instrument failures, and you had all that stuff that you could program into the game. And then then you look at something like this, where there's one scenario in particular on the Peninsula Corridor. It's like a Bay Area blackout or something like that, where you get to the first stop for the on the passenger route, and then you get a prompt telling you that head-end power for the passenger cars has failed, But if you learned how to start the head-end power and you actually turned it on, when it gives you the prompt telling you that head-end power failed, you go up, attempt to start it like it tells you to do, and then it tells you, okay, I guess it just broke. Switch to the switch to the cab car at the other end and bring it back to the shop. It's like, switch to the cab car at the other end and bring it into the shop. But before you leave, you can go through the startup procedure and you can hear the head-end power successfully restart. So I don't think the game actually has a mechanic for system failures. It just tells you that something failed in the script for the scenario, and then you just have to accept, like, oh, I guess that's just not working. But it's not a critical system, so they don't even actually tell you how to set it up or what it's used for. It's just like, oh, this thing failed. Our imaginary passengers that boarded the train aren't happy anymore. It's just like the most ridiculous thing. Like, you put that into the game, but it doesn't do anything. Like, take stuff like this, for example. Like, none of the routes that I've played on have a functioning map display. But there's a panel for it. There's just some weird stuff about this game. Alright, let's turn down the dynamic brake again. I don't know why this has, like, a decimal place. It should probably just be, like, hull positions, like throttle. Especially since I don't even think it does anything. Like, is there a difference between 2.0 and 2.6? Does it matter? I don't know. Alright, making progress. Six miles to the final destination. So you look down there, that's the indication for dynamic braking. The percentage has changed. So maybe begins doing something. Let's go initial reduction. Now the speed limit's going up to 35 at 400 yards, but it'll actually be 35 in, or 1.2 miles after that. Certainly the hard part about this is knowing when to slow down in order to get where you need to be on time and stop in the right place. But you don't learn that with the freight routes. You learn that with the passenger routes. The freight routes just get there in a timely manner and don't go over the speed limit. That's kind of the extent of it. Steeper. basically I can just keep this dynamic brake position. And as long as it gets me around there, when I get closer to that zone, speed it up a little bit. I doubt it'll matter too much. Forward to the final stop. Aside from that problem of blowing through the switch at twice the speed limit, it's been a good run so far. And I want to say the gold medal is at like 5,500. So just by reaching the stop in Altoona, I should be high enough to get gold on this delivery. It's going to get worse before it gets better. So far. Right, about 1,000 yards to the lower speed limit. Does look nice, I'll give him that. Alright, 50 and closing. with the BNSF route, I think it also shows you the bottom limit of the dynamic brake. Because once you get down to 10 miles an hour, the brake power indicator over there gets a lot lower. Or it starts like fluctuating, and it's really hard to explain, but it just starts getting weird. Initial reduction. Still driving under the speed limit. Let's go down to there. It might happen if I slow down too far on this one. But yeah, if it gets below 10 miles an hour, it might start like fluctuating in power. Because I think below 10 you're supposed to use the actual brakes instead of the dynamic brakes. And above 30, it's not really using the dynamic brakes to the best of its ability. These are all things I wish I wasn't guessing at. I wish it was adequately explained. But that might be asking for a lot. Speed limit, but I think the speed limit's about to go down anyway, or at least it certainly should go down. Then you would think you would get on here. Let's see. Yeah, this is all automated. Go into here, and you go to this side storage track that you only have access to from the main line. And then that's just where we're going to sit. Yellow signal basically means to proceed with caution. You're around other vehicles, so keep your eyes open. And then my stop's at 1.3 miles, and the red signal's at 1.5, so basically saying you're going to go to the to stop on this intermediate track, and that's just where you're going to stay. But, as you can see, that's where the job ends anyway. We are to the final destination, and the fact that we're still going downhill. Not even 0.5%, but we're going downhill the same. Or 14 miles per hour. Let's give it initial reduction. Gonna try to see if I can come to a nice gentle stop up here. Let's see, is there one on the back? Yep, right there. End of train device. That's the thing you're communicating with to get what the brake pressure is at the farthest end of the pipe. It's also radio controlled so that when you hit this switch, it opens up the valve and just starts dumping the air. And then that causes every car to detect a change in air pressure, and they all start applying the brakes. little bit past it, but you don't get points for... it's like you don't get points for being close in the freight routes. Alright, so gold medal. Alright, so that seems like a pretty good place to stop for this particular run. So, thank you all for watching. I'm McLaren 2009. This has been Train Sim World 3. Thank you, and